Shabbat Shalom. So we are in the book of Devarim, also known as Deuteronomy. And in the book of Deuteronomy, we are standing at the precipice of the land of Israel. We are at the threshold. We are about to cross over, which means those 40 years in the wilderness are about to come to a close, and the continuation of our people back in the land of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob is about to resume. But that means that there are certain points that are going to suddenly become very relevant for the Israelites of that generation. It's hard for us to imagine, but if you were in their shoes, for 40 years, growing up for most of them within the setting of that wilderness camp, being fed by the manna from the sky, being given water from the well that was there for you, what is going to be the biggest shock once you move into the land of Israel? You've got to find food and water, or more importantly, you're going to be digging wells, and you're going to be plowing fields, and you're going to be staring at the backside of a cow an awful lot. Food's not just going to fall from the sky anymore. Food, the drink is not going to just come bubbling up wherever you happen to be. Now, we know that this is a land of milk and honey. We know that it is a land of plenty, but it is also a land that is going to require a great deal of effort and exertion. That also means that the primary way that most people will be living and gaining their food is not going to be through commerce. It's not going to be through being a craftsman. It will be by farming. That's pretty much the job of 99% of the population once they cross over that threshold, once they move into the land of Israel. Except for that 1%. Who is that one segment that will not be working the land, so to speak, because they won't have any? The Levites, of which the Kohanim, the priests, are a subset. Always remember, the Kohanim are a particular family of Levites. They are still within the general family tree of Levi. So they will not be given this inheritance of land. It will be divided among the other tribes, the rest of us. So how are they going to get food and water? It's not falling from the sky anymore. It's not bubbling up from the well anymore. What are they going to eat? What's that? The tithes and the offerings, right? So if you are a Kohen and someone brings an offering to the temple, for many of them, and you are the one doing the sacrifice for that person, you get to keep portions of that sacrifice, and you know, that's not so bad. It's a very nice commission, if you will, for performing the service for the community. But not every Kohen is offering up a sacrifice every day, which means they're going to start getting a little hungry in between those services. So there are also tithes that are offered, of which we see some of them outlined in the Torah portion of this week. Now, what is a tithe? Something that is perhaps not as familiar a concept in its literal interpretation for us as it was to our ancestors. A tenth, not of your income, of what you make. Right? I know we talk about income as though, so what do you make at that? And such questions, but this was literally a tenth of what you made. You would count your sheep, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, that one goes off as a tithe. You would be counting up your grain, you'd be counting up your fruit, your grapes, whatever it was that you were doing, and a tenth of it, is heading off for the Levites and the Kohanim, and a more complicated pattern than that, but we'll deal with the simplified version for the moment. It's a weird cycle of tithing, but that gets more than we want to talk about. But think for a moment again. You are one of these Israelites. You have just finally come into the land of Israel. You have fought wars to be able to live in peace, to be able to stare at the backside of that cow while you plow your field. And when you are done plowing, and when you are done harvesting, and you have winnowed and threshed and got everything ready, a tenth of everything you just made is going to some schnook who gets to sit in the temple? Is going to somebody that doesn't have to do this? That this is somehow fair? It's called taxing. It's called taxation. And yet we never hear within any part of Jewish literature people complaining about the tithing system. And we're Jews. We complain. The fact that we don't shows that there was a fundamental understanding that this was part of the bargain, if you will. That the other tribes were given land, they had their own property, they had their own ability to make themselves, through their hard work, to be able to thrive and to enjoy the fruits of their labor, but that there did need to be a dedicated class of others that would maintain, excuse me, all of those other elements of Judaism that don't come easily if you're spending all your time staring at the back of a cow. That while you certainly still needed to be educated and to study and to participate in Jewish life, even when you were a farmer, that other institutions, such as the temple itself and the court systems and the general formal educational process, would be lost if we didn't have a designated group of people that were taking care of this, that would be there when we needed them. It's one of those great ironies, is that everybody needs the altar at some place, at some time in their life, but nobody needs the altar all the time in their life. I need to bring a sacrifice because I made a mistake. I need to bring a sacrifice because it's a holiday. I need to bring a sacrifice because it's celebration. Well, what's going on when I'm not there? If I'm not bringing those offerings and not helping to then support the Kohanim, well, if I'm not there and no one else is there, they still got to eat. They still have to live. Having an a la carte form of Judaism where we only support Jewish institutions when we want to is a way to guarantee that they will not be there when we want them to be there. But more fundamentally even than this, and our own interest in making sure we maintain our Jewish institutions, is a lesson that is being taught not just about the Kohanim and Levi'im, because the Kohanim and Levi'im are not the only people who benefit from the tithing in the Jewish system. Who else benefits from tithing? The stranger, the poor, the widow, the orphan, those that are in need, those whose land has not been productive, those who are dislocated from their land due to flood or war or strife or some other misfortune. They have the right to come onto your property and pick up your fallen sheaves. Right? You're out there harvesting and you drop something? Tough. You don't get to pick it up anymore. It no longer belongs to you, says the Torah. It belongs to that guy over there who you don't even know, who hasn't been growing it. He hasn't been working it. This isn't his property, but it now belongs to him just as much as our tithing belongs to the Kohanim or the Levi'im. And the corners of our field, likewise, they are allowed to take from. And we still also have to provide a formal tithe that will support those that are poor as well. Now, you can imagine that our ancestors would have also potentially begrudged this. Indeed, the Torah talks about hardening our own hearts, closing our hand, and not being willing to support those that are in economic hardship. Because the Torah understands that it will be difficult for our ancestors to accommodate this idea, that now God will not be supporting everyone. We will be supporting everyone with the combined blessing that God has given all of us. And that means that from time to time, individuals are going to need to give more in order to support those who have less. But they are giving from what God gave all of us, not just me. And that concept of communal understanding, that what we are sharing from truly belongs to all of us, even as I treasure my own parcel of land, my own piece that I have worked on, is a fundamental understanding embedded within Jewish tzedakah and Jewish charity and Jewish theology for all time. We do not look at those who struggle and say God is making them suffer and therefore it's not my business to help them. We look at those who are suffering and say, you know what? I have an obligation to help them. Just as were the roles reversed, they would have an obligation to help me. Now, it's still very easy to get nervous about this sort of concept, because after all, if I give them, and if I give them, and if I give them, and if I give everybody, then what will be left for me? Then won't I become poor as well? Well, Judaism certainly does believe that there is a limit to what one person can give, but it also teaches nobody who is giving sensibly has ever gone broke by giving tzedakah. That instead, we find that it is able to stretch far enough. It is, what we have as a community will be able to support all of us if we allow ourselves that extra effort. And if we still feel nervous, if we still say, yeah, but if I give away, if I don't save it for a rainy day, if I don't put it into that investment account, then what happens if one day I'm poor? What greater tragedy could there be? Indeed, the word poor has become, especially in the modern world, one of the worst things that you could ever imagine happening. It is so bad that we are almost loath to even use the word poor. Some elements of that unusability because too many people blame the poor for being poor, but we also recognize that being poor is a terrible place to be in life. It was not always so. Our ancestors, for most of our history, took turns being poor, because your field might be productive for 5 years and mine was not, and after that, who knows where the rain will fall, who knows where the locusts will eat, who knows where the bandits will burn. It could be that I will be in a position to help you instead. And so we recognized that poverty was simply a fact of existence. But now we believe that poverty is somehow a greatest crime that a person could be suffering from. If we are afraid of being poor more than anything else, then that says that we have allowed being poor to become a hell on earth. If we are afraid of being poor to the point that we will not help others lest we impoverish ourselves, then that means that we do not believe that we have the capacity to support one another, which means I will live in perpetual fear that someday I would need help and no one will help me, because I have already said by my own actions that I don't believe we can properly help one another. This fear of poverty that has crept into our psyche is the antithesis of what Torah, especially here in Deuteronomy, is trying to teach us. As we cross that threshold into the land of Israel, we are being a gift. Not me, not you. We are being given a gift. It is because of our shared destiny as the Jewish people that we have a claim upon Eretz Israel, the land of Israel, which is flowing with milk and honey. And as a shared blessing, we have an obligation to share the blessing as the blesser, God, has instructed. And that means that if we carry it out properly, if we actually implement what God has told us of looking at our brother and sister in the eyes and saying, I can help you this year. I can help you get back on your feet. And we know that they will do the same for us should we be in a similar circumstance. Then that fear of poverty and of deprivation vanishes. What's there to be afraid of? You'll always have something to eat because someone else will help you when you need it. And they will always have something to eat because you will help them when they need it. Yes, the manna is no longer falling from the sky and the water is no longer coming from the well. But the blessings that God gave us to produce with our own hands are still more than abundant, more than sufficient to be able to help all of us. Allow ourselves to feel that need of each other and to recognize the obligation to each other, to still work, to toil endlessly for ourselves to be able to build up this world, to not expect that others will take care of us 24/7, but to recognize that when the need is there, I can count on us. And when there's a need from someone else, they can count on us. This is one of the great truths that Judaism has tried to give, not just to our people, but to the world. And yet, so much of the world still lives in fear that if they were in need, they would be treated the way they have treated others. Shabbat Shalom.